The year is 2023, but the world is not as we know it. The Soviet Union never collapsed. The Cold War never truly ended. Instead, it evolved into something far more complex, a prolonged standoff between two superpowers locked in an uneasy equilibrium. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was not followed by the dissolution of the USSR, but by a series of reforms that stabilized the Soviet economy and political structure. Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika were not the death knell of communism, but its reinvention. The Soviet Union adapted, survived, and by the turn of the millennium, it had become a modernized, technologically advanced, and militarily formidable state. The United States, still the leader of the Western Bloc, found itself in a prolonged rivalry not just with the USSR, but with a resurgent China, which had also avoided the economic liberalization of the 1990s. The world was divided not into unipolar dominance, but into a multipolar struggle where ideology, economics, and military power were constantly in flux. In this world, the Soviet Union never lost its grip on Eastern Europe. The Warsaw Pact remained intact, though its member states were granted greater autonomy in exchange for loyalty to Moscow. The Baltic states, Ukraine and Belarus, remained Soviet republics, their nationalist movements suppressed not by brute force, but by a combination of economic incentives and political concessions. The Soviet economy, though still centralized, had embraced limited market reforms, allowing for technological innovation while maintaining state control over key industries. The Internet, as we know it, does not exist. Instead, there are two parallel digital networks: the Western Web, dominated by American and European corporations, and the Soviet Information Grid, a heavily monitored but highly efficient system that serves both civilian and military purposes. The two networks are incompatible, creating a digital iron curtain that reinforces the ideological divide. Space exploration took a different path. The Soviet Union, not content with the symbolic victory of Sputnik, pushed forward with its own space program, establishing permanent lunar bases by the early 2000s. The United States, in response, accelerated its own efforts, leading to a new space race, this time for resources and strategic dominance beyond Earth's orbit. The Middle East is a powder keg, as always, but the dynamics are different. The Soviet Union, with its influence over Syria and Iraq, acts as a counterbalance to American interests in the region. The oil-rich nations of the Persian Gulf are forced to navigate between two superpowers, each offering protection in exchange for allegiance. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq never happened, not in the way we remember them. Instead, the Soviet Union maintained a strong presence in Afghanistan, using it as a buffer state against potential American encroachment. In this world, the European Union is weaker, divided between those who seek closer ties with the United States and those who prefer neutrality or even cooperation with the USSR. Germany remains split, not by a physical wall, but by economic and political realities. West Germany thrives as a capitalist powerhouse, while East Germany, though less prosperous, benefits from Soviet investment in heavy industry and technology. The global economy is a battleground. The Soviet Union, with its vast resources and centralized planning, competes directly with the United States in key sectors like energy, aerospace, and artificial intelligence. The ruble is a strong currency, backed by gold and rare earth minerals extracted from Siberia and the Arctic. The dollar remains the world's reserve currency, but its dominance is challenged by a Soviet-backed digital currency designed to bypass Western financial systems. Culturally, the world is divided. In the West, capitalism and consumerism reign supreme, but there is a growing sense of unease. The Soviet Union, though still authoritarian, has softened its image, promoting a vision of technological progress and social stability. Soviet cinema, literature, and music have a global audience, though they are carefully curated to avoid dissent. The Soviet people enjoy a higher standard of living than they did in the 1980s, but political freedoms remain limited. The year 2023 is a tense one. The United States and the Soviet Union are engaged in a new arms race, this time focused on hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare, and AI-driven military systems. The threat of nuclear war is ever present, but both sides understand the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Instead, the conflict plays out in proxy wars, economic sabotage, and espionage. In this world, the Soviet Union never dissolved. It adapted, evolved, and remained a superpower. The Cold War never ended, it simply changed form. The world is not unipolar but multipolar, with the USSR, the United States, and China each vying for dominance. The question is not whether the Soviet Union will collapse, but whether it can maintain its position in a world that is increasingly interconnected, yet deeply divided. And then, in the summer of 2023, something unexpected happens. A young Soviet scientist, working in a secret research facility in Siberia, makes a breakthrough in quantum computing. The discovery has the potential to revolutionize encryption, making the Soviet information grid impregnable to Western cyber attacks. But it also has another, more dangerous application: the ability to decrypt any communication anywhere in the world. The scientist, an idealist who believes in the Soviet system but also in the universal right to knowledge, faces a moral dilemma. Should he hand over his discovery to the state, knowing it will be used to strengthen Soviet control? Or should he leak it to the world, risking his life but potentially breaking the deadlock of the Cold War? His decision will shape the future. If he chooses loyalty, the Soviet Union will gain an unprecedented advantage, tilting the balance of power in its favor. If he chooses defiance, the world might finally see the end of the Cold War, not through collapse, but through a forced reckoning. The scientist sits in his lab, staring at the screen. The weight of history rests on his shoulders. What will he do? The answer will determine whether the Soviet Union remains a superpower or whether the world takes its first steps toward a new era. And so, the story of the Soviet Union continues, not as a relic of the past, but as a living, breathing force shaping the future. The Cold War never ended. It simply became the way of the world.